Hi, Hope in Christ community. This is our sixth lesson on the Gospel of John, and we are diagramming. By the way, this is a great way to do your QTs because all we're doing is we're taking just a few verses, or today I think it might be just one verse, and we're looking at it in detail. And a great way to meditate and think about what the verse says. And so let's go ahead and get started. It says, this is John 1, verse 14. It says, "And the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified about him and cried out, saying, 'This was he of whom I said, He who comes after me has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me.'" Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Looking at verse 14, I see lots of sentences kind of joined together. And the Word became flesh. That's one sentence. And dwelt among us. That is not a full sentence. I think it's missing a subject. We'll go on. And we saw his glory. That's another full sentence. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father. That's not a full sentence. Full of grace and truth is not a full sentence. Now, one great thing about our Bibles is that they've already put the commas in there for us. And so that's a great way of separating the sentences. And that's what I was looking at as I was doing this. Okay, so the first line here. And the Word became, there's your verb there, the main verb. And the Word is the subject. Okay. So Jesus became flesh. So the second line, it says, "and dwelt among us." Now, we know that this is not a full sentence. It is lacking a subject. And so the Word is the subject. It's borrowing. So this is what I'm going to be doing. It's connected by this word and the conjugation. So I will be putting a line here to show me that the Word is the subject, and so the Word became flesh, the Word dwelt. He lived among us. So that's another verb here. Okay. This is how I would diagram this. Third line. "And we saw his glory." We is the subject, saw is the verb, and here's the object, his glory. All right. And so this third line here is a response. So the first two lines talks about Jesus. He put on flesh and he lived with us. And in response, we saw him. We saw his glory. Okay. Now the next phrase here, "glory as of the only begotten from the Father," is giving us detail on the word glory. Because he says, we saw him. We saw his glory. Well, what did that glory look like? And he's describing that. He says, "glory as of the only begotten from the Father." Now, the word begotten is important because it sounds as though it means like birthed, right? But in the original language, it also means unique, one of a kind. And so it's not to say that Jesus is literally a son necessarily, but that he's a unique one who has been sent by the Father. Okay. And that's what I see. So let me go ahead and do this here. I'm going to put a little arrow here under glory. Okay, to show that this phrase is describing this object. He says, we saw his glory. Well, what did that glory look like? It's the glory that comes from being the unique one that's been sent by the Father, and the glory that is full of grace and truth. That last phrase here is, describing to us what yet another type of, he's describing what that glory looked like. And so I'm going to put another arrow here to say that these two phrases, full of grace and truth, and glory as of the begotten from the Father, is actually enhancing, giving us more detail on this word glory. Okay, and I would, as I'm doing this, I would want to look up these words here and what does it mean that he's full of grace, that he's full of truth. What we can say for sure is that, John wants to make sure, he wants to make sure that we know that Jesus is God, that he came from heaven, sent by the Father. He put on flesh. He lived amongst us, and we saw his glory. All right. You looked at Jesus, you saw God. And he describes this glory. He was sent by the Father. He's a unique one. He's not birthed by God, but that he's a unique, one of a kind. And he was full of grace and truth. You look at Jesus, you know truth. You look at me, I have, as much as transparent as I try to be, I have different masks on, I have different hat on, but when you looked at Jesus, you saw truth. The reason being is because, he's God. That's what John is trying to tell you. When you looked at Jesus, he was full of grace and truth, describing God. Okay, and that's the why this word here, full here. He's saying, we can exhibit some grace and we can exhibit some truth, but when you looked at Jesus, he was full of grace and truth. So what a great way to do your QT today. That Jesus, he came, he lived amongst us. We saw him for who he was, that he was God. This is the testimony that John the Apostle is telling us. All right, have a great week, guys. Bye.